So, welcome everyone to our inaugural Feldman lecture, or officially, as we like to call it, the Feldman Entrepreneurial Featured Speaker Series at the Launchpad. We'd especially like to thank our primary sponsor, Jeffrey Wolf Feldman, for whom this series is named. Jeffrey works at Feldman Realty Group, his family's real estate firm in New York. This company was founded in 1943 and currently owns and manages 10 properties in New York City, Southampton, New York, Palm Beach Garden, including the Broadway Chambers Building and the historic Gibbs Building. Jeff was actually the president and CEO of the United Nations Development Corporation until 2011. The UN Development Corporation is actually a New York public benefit corporation that assists the United Nations community with office space and real estate needs. So we'd like to thank Mr. Feldman for his generous contribution for making our speaker series possible. That being said, I would now like to introduce our inaugural speaker for the Feldman Lectures. We welcome Joe Fernandez. So Joe Fernandez is the founder and former CEO of Klout, which was acquired in 2014. While his jaw was actually wired shut for nearly 3 months after surgery, Joe began to develop a deep fascination with the evolution of influence on the social web. The way individuals could instantly broadcast questions, opinions, and ideas to the trusted network, and sparked his curiosity. In 2008, he founded Klout in an effort to help users understand, shape, and be recognized for their influence online. Klout is currently the standard for influence on the social web. Joe actually grew up in Las Vegas, but we are very happy to welcome him home as a hurricane because Joe also attended the University of Miami. So please join me in welcoming Joe Fernandez.
Thank you. You're welcome. Do I use a clicker? Thanks everybody for coming out on a Friday in the crazy weather. My name's Joe. I'm really glad to be here. I'll run through the story of Klout really quick, and there's a intimate group here, so I think a conversation will be more exciting at the end. So I came here in 1996. It was funny even finding this picture because it was actually a physical picture that had to be scanned if we didn't have digital cameras. And thinking back on coming to UM, it was actually the internet was just starting to blow up. Everyone was talking about it. It was on every magazine cover. I remember getting here and we didn't have internet in the dorms. You had to get your own AOL subscription and kill the phone line, and nobody could call in when you were online, and your roommate would be super pissed. And it was everyone was kind of fascinated but didn't know what it was. But it was blowing up. There was press was going nuts about all these companies being built, and you'd see all these people becoming internet millionaires. And it was driving me insane. I was here in school and just wanted to build something, and I was freaking out that all the cool things were being built already, which is funny to think about 15 years ago, being afraid that all the cool stuff had already been built. But all these companies were going public and getting all this attention, and I was kind of freaking out being here. And as we got closer and closer to graduation, I was pretty much set that I was going to go to California and try to get in on this somehow. I took a job with a consulting firm almost solely because they promised to move me to San Francisco. And a week after graduation, they said, well, actually, we can take you to LA. San Francisco's not ready yet. We don't have our office ready. So moved to LA in 2000. And my job was an engineer, writing code. It was a consulting firm, so we'd have clients. Those clients were people who were trying to create e-businesses. So it was people would call it an e-business. And the first client we had was actually trying to take the insurance claim process and make it all online. Sounds really basic, but back then, nothing like that even existed. So it was a good start to just learning. But as soon as I got out there, 2000, basically the market peaked and everything started falling apart. By April 2001, I was laid off and they closed the LA office, and basically the whole company had imploded, and went from prior to graduation having tons of companies trying to recruit. I was flying all over, meeting with companies, and kind of had my choice to completely tech full burst and like went a whole year basically just playing John Madden football at home because no one like would send resumes out every single day for entry level, any kind of position, and like literally not even get an email saying like thanks for your resume, just like crickets, nobody caring. And this was like a very challenging time. Being somebody who's like wanted to build cool stuff and feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm like less than a year out of school and my career has already peaked and nothing's going to happen. And like, this is basically really my friend Jeff is here with me. We basically graduated together and just played John Madden football for like 2 years. It was close. They were close games. But 2003, just on that, I like had got a really, really crappy job just to get a job to like not be homeless and just try to like, be able to pay rent and stuff. But I met somebody in LA, and this person had been a school psychologist, and I didn't even know school psychology was like a thing that existed in the world. But he was telling me that there was these new federal regulations where schools had to test kids for NCLB and IDA and all these things and report their findings to the state and federal government. But he was retiring because he was spending all his time on the paperwork. And I couldn't believe there wasn't a system that helped manage this. And because I built this system to help manage the process of filing insurance claims, I was like, oh, we could build that. So I actually convinced my boss to quit, and we both quit and started building this system we called the Score and Report. And we managed to get it in 85% of the school districts in the U.S. Because there was a federal law, like they had to do this thing. We didn't raise any money. There was only 4 people in the whole company. But for what it was like a pretty good success, like small time good success. We sold that in 2005, and I'd always wanted to live in New York City, so I decided to just move to New York. And I met some guys who were starting a company in the real estate data space. So they were aggregating all data interesting to a residential real estate transaction. And I came in and ran the product and technology for them and was kind of like a late co-founder. But that company still exists. It's called Onboard. So if you use Trulia or Zillow or any of those sites, most of the data actually comes from them. And that was a great experience because Score and Report was just like, we got super lucky. We had no idea what we were doing. It was really a mess. This one, I worked with really great people. I was definitely the junior person and got to like ride their coattails and learn. That company's still around and doing well. But towards the end of that, I actually had this crazy thing. I had jaw surgery in like December of 2007. And my jaw was wired shut. We was talking about this for 3 months. And nothing even cool happened. I wish there was a story I could say, like, I got in a fight and, like, you should see the other guy. But, like, it was, like, this weird thing. Like, my jaw was just misaligned, and they had been telling me for a long time I needed the surgery. And finally I did it. And I was wired shut like that for, like, 3 months. And even my mom, if I tried to talk to her, couldn't understand anything I'd say. I'd have to, like, write it down and show it to her. So I pretty much had to rely on Twitter and Facebook and to communicate. And this is, late 2007, early 2008. So it was really early for those platforms. But I became really obsessed with this idea that it was amazing that the people who trusted me the most, I could instantly tell them my opinion on anything. And it would have some impact on them. And there was actually data to measure this. So for like the first time, word of mouth was actually measurable. I was also stuck in my apartment and on a ton of drugs, so it sounded like a really good idea. But I built the prototype for Klout while I was wired shut in the middle of winter in New York in my apartment. And when I got unwired, I tried to go tell all my friends, oh, check this out. This is going to be a big deal. This is really cool. And everyone was like, what is this? Who cares? What is Twitter? Who cares who's influential or popular on it? I couldn't convince any of my friends to quit their jobs to come work on this with me. But I had one friend from New York who had married a Singaporean woman and moved to Singapore and opened an offshore dev shop there. And because I needed more help programming this, I hired them. But I knew it wouldn't work from the distance. Like we couldn't, we were creating something. We needed to be in the same room. So I offshored myself and I went and moved to Singapore for 6 months. And I basically lived in the office, either like slept at the office or one of the engineers' apartments and stayed there while we built. We took kind of my really rough prototype and turned it into a slightly better version that was still very rough, but while I was there, I got there in August. September 2008 is like world financial just mess. And I remember going through this like 2 days of sitting on the couch in the office, pretty much paralyzed of like, what did I do? I like quit my job. I like sold all my stuff and came here. I am never going to be able to get a job. The economy's like destroyed. This isn't going to work. I thought I'd be able to go there and then go raise money and get going. And it was like a very kind of traumatic moment, but it was also freeing in the sense of realizing, well, like this just has to work. And, being able to then just focus on getting to the next step. But actually launched Klout December 24th, 2008. And I was not super sophisticated, like PR media-wise, to launch on Christmas Eve. And my launch strategy was I just tweeted my Klout score, and it kind of went viral though, and people started like wanting to get their Klout scores. And so Klout, if you don't know, this got a little messed up, but what we were doing with Klout is analyzing all of people's social media data and trying to understand how influential you are and on whatever topic. So we know, these are the most influential people in Miami about, movies or sports or fashion or whatever it might be. And people could come in and see their own scores and compare and show you a little bit more on it later. But, this idea of measuring influence, something that was, it was like an abstract thing. It's like measuring love or jealousy or, like saying I planted a flag and said like, we're the standard of measuring influence, and, Klout score is the official way this is done. And I got invited to speak like a week later, and I'd shown Klout just to a few friends, but I got invited to speak at the New York Tech Meetup. And this is, it's like 1,000 people. And I remember getting off the subway and realizing like, I'm about to get in front of 1,000 New Yorkers and tell them I came up. I'm the one who like has the algorithm to determine how important everyone in the room is. And there's a video online of this presentation, and like my hand is shaking and voice is like quivering. But it was well received because the message wasn't about trying to figure out who's on the A list. It was, it's really truly a belief that everybody has influence. And our goal is to just understand what you're influential about and who you influence and help you be rewarded for that. So we would give you tools to be, more influential or to be recognized by whether it was your peers or brands or whoever it might be. I think the next... Oh, this is a funny side story. So the name I was mentioning, the name was Klout. Like the very first thing I wrote on my notebook when I was thinking about it was Klout with a K, and then started like conceptualizing it. So I went online, and of course Klout.com was gone. So I bought Klout.net, and the next day I tracked down who owned Klout.com, and I got him on the phone. I was like, hey, I'll give you $1,000 for Klout.com. And to me, like, that was personal money. That was like, might as well have been $1 million. And he basically laughed at me and was like, no way, I'll never sell this. So for like, this was September 2009. So for like, almost 18 months, I harassed this guy like every day, like, hey, I want to buy Klout.com. Can you sell it to me? Kept harassing him. In between, I moved from New York to San Francisco because I wanted to be close to Twitter and Facebook. Turns out the guy who owned Klout.com also lived in San Francisco. So I just like stalked him, and he tweeted one day that he was at a restaurant. I got my first check from an investor. It was $25,000. I cashed the check, which you're not supposed to do, like got cash, and I kept the cash at my apartment. And I waited for this guy to tweet that he was somewhere, and I went there and found him and said, hey, I'm the guy who's been calling you. I'm never going to stop harassing you. Like, give me Klout.com. And I threw $5,000 in cash on the table, and he was at a table with a bunch of people, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's a lot of money. And I had my computer, and we did the domain transfer like right then in the restaurant. So like as I tweeted this as I walked out the door. But the name really did matter, and I feel like our brand, when we started, there was actually like, I felt like anybody smart enough to like hit the Twitter API to get access to Twitter data and use a calculator had an influence score, and we just came and completely owned the space. I'm going to show, I think, one more slide before this. But so we were really focused on this idea of, we were building PageRank for people, understanding for every person what they were important, how they were important, what stories they could tell, what, they were the best source of information for. And, went from just my Klout score to now 700 million people have Klout scores. Like we have the Klout scores for 700 million people. It's like 15,000 companies use Klout for data. And I'll talk a little bit more detail about that, but here's a quick video. This is funny. A furniture company, we bought our furniture and they wanted to make a video about us. It's loosely about the furniture, but it's actually about the company, and it's really one of my favorite pictures of what life was like at Klout and kind of in this startup world. So it's really quick, share this.
Is the currency of social media. We're also overwhelmed by information. So we trust our friends to build them on time. People who live with us, social media, company or cause or business, just believe that every person has to be able to measure that with scores of times in the crowd. We work with people, spread their voice further, and you work. It's sort of, I guess you could say, for when I started a leadership movement in the States, and I started to do privilege, the year random desks, and the buildings before, and now we're pretty much bursting at the seams. So there's a big giant all around. Every room, every meeting room, every corner has a person. It's so effective in keeping the whole company alive and moving outside. We live in a safe life, and it really transforms the world. You see throughout the day, people fighting throughout the state. Even at the beginning, each state trying to put their foot together, so you can overhear what I'm doing, you energy on the way. Literally, the practice states will cut up. There's a new company that's you hire 3 or 4 people, somebody else in my people, a lot of people all trying to change so fast. So it is like a constant transition. It's still professional and critical to run the process. So as you're here, we really try to get ourselves into this system. We can't be comfortable in a space where there's lunch, keep talking, happy hour every single Friday here. I'm going to fight the Friday coming out here and having conversations. It's not like an only these Friday clubhouse. This is the problem to get everyone there, give value to the world. Not an ID for trying money, it's trying ideas and everything. what you priority with it, not just the work, but interacting with everybody that is actually in your environment. People that experience all that stuff, but together. And people will be empowered in that content. If we do our job, we will change it so that the balance of power is back.
So, furniture company did that, but it was awesome because it was, I think, a really good vibe of kind of what life was like. We got acquired. I'll talk about that, but we're able to build a team from just me in my bedroom to like almost 100 people in this crazy warehouse in San Francisco, working on this big idea to do PageRank for people, to understand an abstract concept of influence and draw data to it and make it accessible to individuals so that they can understand their own influence, and to companies so they can better serve people. A great example is we still have a lot of hotels where our data is plugged into their reservation system. So if you're in Las Vegas or lots of other places and you check in, your Klout score, somebody behind the desk will see your Klout score, and they might upgrade your room, or they might send you to a show, or comp you a meal, because they know when you talk about these things, this great weekend you had, this awesome hotel you stayed at, like, your friends are going to listen, and they want to ensure that experience. We have lots of call centers where calls are routed based on your Klout score. So, maybe you're not the person who should sit on hold. Maybe you should talk to a manager. So it's used in lots of interesting ways. On more of a pure advertising way, this was kind of our primary monetization. It's funny to think about brands would actually pay us to give their stuff away for free to influencers. So we would do what we call Klout Perks, and this was when they were launching the A8. We actually let people influential about not just cars, but things like architecture and design and technology, things relevant to Audi's brand. Let those people have an A8 for a week and give them a stipend so they could go drive it somewhere cool and stay overnight and have this adventure. And, our belief is these are the most passionate people online who talk about this stuff anyway. If we put them in the right position, they'll tell the story, and you get all this amazing content from authentic people. We don't trust ads, we trust our friends. And so it's really this unique take on advertising where the user actually was the one who primarily benefited, because they got to have these cool experiences and tell their friends. And we actually have very strict rules that a person can say whatever they want. Like, if a brand works with us, we make sure they know that a person might say, like, I hate the A8, it's the worst car ever, or whatever. A8's actually pretty nice. So I got it for a couple days, and it was really hard to go back to the Honda Civic. But we, really building on this idea of authenticity and all, these things are obviously very critical. Going through the process, I know people here are obviously interested in entrepreneurship, so we raised a lot of money. We raised almost $50 million. Actually raised money from Microsoft. It's crazy. Bill Gates emailed me about a bug he found in the system before I got to meet him. And we had Kleiner Perkins, which is a really prominent investor. So we got to work with amazing people, and learned a lot about just how to raise money, the dangers of raising too much money, and the pressure of fundraising and all these things, if anyone has questions about that. We came along at this moment where social media was kind of blowing up, and people didn't know if it was a fad. Was it MySpace was this thing for kids, and then is Twitter, it's people tweeting about what they ate for lunch, who cares? And people were unsure if it was a real thing or not. And we kind of rode that wave of, companies are paying attention to it, and what's really going on. And we got all this crazy press. It was overwhelming, in a good way, but it was this, attention that was way beyond like the maturity of our team or the maturity of our product. And we'd have these like crazy things happen, like Britney Spears' manager calling us mad that her Klout score was lower than Lady Gaga's, and like coming to the office. This was like the New Yorker, like running cartoons with like about the Klout scores, and I remember like I remember when I started, I was like, well, if we could just get one article in TechCrunch, like that would be amazing. To like having days where the whole front page was Klout stuff, and then people saying we're the most amazing thing and it's the stupidest thing that's ever happened, and like the back, getting too much press, and then the backlash, and then like all the stuff that kind of went along with that was definitely an interesting and intense experience. This press piece came out this time. We changed our algorithm, and a lot of people's scores dropped, and it caused this like unreasonable drama where hashtag Occupy Klout was trending on Twitter with my phone number associated to it. Because if you searched Klout phone number, my cell phone came up, and that was because when I started the company, I was just like in my bedroom, just me. Like I never really had any idea. Like my wildest dream was like we'd get one TechCrunch article and maybe Twitter would buy us in a couple of years for like, I remember telling my girlfriend at the time, wife now, that like, it's probably okay if I quit my job because like, if this goes bad, I bet Twitter would just hire me to come work there. If it goes good, we might be like 5 or 8 people and Twitter might buy us for like $5 million. Like that would be amazing. And so like, it was like, that was like the horizon of my dreams, was like how big it could be. And then, people going crazy about it. I was getting death threats and had to like change my phone number, and I would get hundreds of calls a day, people freaking out about like, why did my score drop? It's not fair. I was on vacation. You guys are jerks. And like super unnecessary intensity around it. But it was cool. Then we got bought like about 15 or so months ago. We were acquired by a company who was kind of a broader, what they do is they help companies understand who their most important customers are, and Klout understands who across the whole internet you need to be aware of and be friends with. So it was a really great partnership, and but like a bittersweet kind of like, oh my gosh, my baby, like we created this thing, and it lives on as part of a bigger company, but like to go through the whole cycle from like one person in a bedroom to like 100 people in a warehouse to like hundreds of people around the world and part of a big company that's like going public. It was definitely like an intense journey, and but amazing. And people would always ask me like, how what is this experience like as I was going through it? And I'd always say like, it didn't matter to me like how it came out, like if we sold for a lot of money or we didn't or what happened. Like I knew there was no way I could look back on it and not think it was amazing, like going through it all and creating something that like actually captures the world's imagination. Like if you go on Amazon now, there's like, I think there's 20 books about Klout. There's a Klout for Dummies. There's like all these books about Klout. There's another 20 books that were like meaningful chapters of, and people around the world use it. And that was to me really exciting to create something that like actually touches that many people. So that's really like the condensed Klout story. I feel really weird giving advice, but I thought everyone here is entrepreneurs, are interested in entrepreneurship. A couple of things I learned that like may be helpful or not. I guess with the caveat that like everyone has advice, and you'll get a lot of advice, and I'm sure you'll get advice every day. But like one thing I definitely learned is like advice kind of doesn't matter. It's helpful as like a data point, but like your instincts are truly what kind of has to guide you through this stuff. But really just like, I've talked this, like the passion of creating things and building things, and not being like caught up on, things having to be perfect, or figure out how to code. Like I just taught myself how to code, or figure out how to read data, or write something, write about stuff that other people are creating, and really think about it. Like, or partner with people and find people to collaborate with, like just getting in the practice of creating things. I have a graveyard of dumb ideas that were like abandoned. I had 2 companies that were actually okay, and then 1 company that is pretty good. And like, I even look at Klout as a practice for the next company, and just like creating should help you get better at creating the next thing. It's really, I think money is like, for young people coming into their careers, of course you want money, like, if you're, I remember being super broke in college and just wanting to be able to do things that, like I lived in Pearson all 4 years with no car. So I don't know if that's cool these days, but back then it certainly wasn't. It's required for 1 year. Well, I did it for 4. I think my RA was a freshman, my last year. But like, what I find people doing is, once you get like making money, you start spending money, and you like buy stuff, and then you need to like support that lifestyle, and it starts really quickly limiting your ability to take risk and try stuff. And you get comfortable in a certain lifestyle, and it gets harder to do things like go to Singapore and go sleep on a couch for 6 months, or do whatever it takes. And optimizing for learning and not cash. So putting yourself in a position where like you're challenged, but you have really great mentors and people around you, and a network that you feel like they're gonna go do cool things, so that you grow all together, is way, way better than cash. And then just the being not afraid to just to put the work in. I think it's easy to make excuses and easy to not do things that, I would drive home from Klout every single day, and by the time I drive home, it would be like 10 at night, and ask myself, like, did I do everything I could possibly do for the company today? And if I didn't feel like that, I would go home and work more, and like for 7 years. And, being willing to like, if you're not willing to put that kind of work in, like, it's going to be tough. If you are, like, you can build cool stuff. And, but I think having that like mindset of like, I'll do what it takes to succeed, and will get you a long ways. I think embracing the fact that you're not in Silicon Valley to your advantage is a huge, huge opportunity. I actually just moved out of San Francisco because I was bored of it. Like, everyone just talks about tech. I felt like it was like nerds building stuff for nerds, and I'm a nerd and I like technology, but like, the opportunity to have a different perspective and approach problems from a different angle, I think is super, super valuable, and use that to your advantage. Miami has its own culture and own flavor and own kind of influences from around the world. Like, I think stuff can be born out of Miami that is incredibly unique, and especially in a consumer tech environment like that's where breakouts happen, is through kind of these unexpected moments. And finally, this is actually in our office. It wasn't in the video, but we had this huge sign made of "Be bold." It's just not being afraid to do these kind of crazy things and try things and put yourself out there in these seemingly like impossible situations, because they won't all work, but like things will, you'll be in the game, and kind of eventually, when you put yourself all out there, it's amazing how many things start falling into place for you. So like, not being afraid to just go for it, as to whatever extent you can. But that's really it. I want to just be able to talk and answer any questions more than present. So thank you guys for listening through this. Not really. I know anytime I would be going to like a big meeting where I'd have to negotiate like dollars in a like intense way, I would pretty much just blast like Tupac the whole drive there or something like that. So maybe that'll help, but not really. I actually found one of the best things about going to Singapore was it pulled me out of like obsessing about tech news and what everybody else was doing and what everybody else was building, and you have a million blog posts that come out every day. So I don't know. It's easy. Every startup kind of has their own ways. Like I don't think there is like one great book or anything. So the question was that startups can be really risky. What were some of the kind of repercussions, I guess, personally and then also professionally of that? And then we got a lot of like backlash in the press, and what was that like? The personal side, it was really hard. Like I went like 3 years with no salary, and we couldn't go out to dinner. We couldn't do, we kind of had to like, my girlfriend and I just like, luckily she, we really partnered together, and she supported me through it. But like, it was definitely like a lifestyle change. And, like I was down, like I remember when we finally got some funding, I spent the first chunk on buying a domain, but I was like at the very end of like, don't know how we're going to pay rent this month. And it's just intense and scary, and, but like personally, like that stuff would just drive me more. The press stuff was really interesting. Like Klout was kind of this magnet because, for a lot of reasons, like, it was super personal to people because it was like your identity. It was like how important you are. And, we did some things that drew attention, but like would make people mad. Like the fact that you would search Klout and it would be like your face with a number next to it. It's like very visceral of like, and the number might be going down. And like, it's different than you search Google for your name, and like, you probably don't get, if your name shows up 5th in the list or whatever, like, you're probably not like super mad at Google, but like people get super mad at us. And especially because the score would fluctuate, and when their score was high, they would love us and they would like brag about their Klout score. Like the second their score went down, it would be like barrage of blog posts about how we're the stupidest thing ever. And I looked at it, we really early kind of realized like we were going to be this lightning rod, and just embraced it. So from a team perspective, we just owned it. Like we called ourselves Klout Laws. So like we're like outlaws, and like we didn't care. Like we thrived on it. We liked that people, like we did not care at all that people liked us or didn't like us. We knew what we were building. We knew that it was important. We knew the good it could do, and all the noise in between like didn't really matter. And so once we kind of took that stance, it was like awesome. And I don't know, it was fun seeing people get so riled up. So in choosing investors for our seed round, it really wasn't much of a choice. It was like whoever would write a check. Honestly, like I pitched Klout probably to 200 investors. And I mean, it was like all I did for like a year, it took like a year our first round was $1.5 million. It took like a year, 200 investors, every day, pitching. And I mean, we got none of the name, like the people who were like the cool investors to get, like they all said no. And it was just a lot of the people who said, it was like the long tail of, one was we got a lot of CEOs who were actually using our data, so that was like good. And it was just like all random people. So we had 37 angel investors, which was, most people have like 6 angel investors, 4 angel investors, because it's a pain to manage that many people. So we had 37, and they were like anybody would have heard of at that time. And it was just literally whoever would write me a check. Did you have a second part to your question?
Yeah. So, what sort of questions
Angel investors were, so we really kind of took off, like we went from like pitching 200 people and taking a year to raise angel money to getting Kleiner Perkins, which is like arguably one of the top 2 or 3 best VC investment firms in the world, giving us our term sheet for the next round, and it taking like 2 days and having every firm fighting over us in the course of like 10 months. So it was this like weird, so we really hit like an inflection point after that first seed money. So those guys didn't bother at all. They were, they couldn't believe their luck. Like they were super excited and supportive. The real pressure came when we raised growth financing. So there's kind of like 3 stages of internet funding. I mean, there's more, but kind of broadly, there's super early stage like seed funding, and those are generally like people or small firms, and they're like very they know they're putting like very risky bets. Then there's like the VCs, the venture capitalists, who are like the A and B rounds, and they're also very comfortable with risk, but it's like bigger checks and more structure. And then you get to the growth funding, and those guys write really big checks, like $30 million. And their assumption is you have it figured out, and they're just pouring gas on it, and you're gonna like go. And like the early guys, you can talk about like, well, we ran into this problem, but we learned this thing, and we think there's a big opportunity here, and we're gonna test this a little while, and and they're like, okay, cool, like keep me informed, and like they're okay with it. Those later guys are like, but the spreadsheet says this, and like they don't care. Like all they want to see is a graph that has like a a hockey stick curve somewhere in it, and like that is real pressure. Like because they're bankers. They're not like seed funds, good angel investors, good VCs even are more partners. Like they're collaborative. They'll work through strategy. Like they want you to win. They're helping. Late stage growth investors are bankers. And it's spreadsheets.
First off, I'd like your hip-hop record. How much can happen in a couple weeks in the store, in the app store, and part of my go-to-market strategy is affiliate marketing strategy, giving codes out to several partners to spread the word about my app for a piece of revenue. What's the difference between that approach and the Klout approach of getting influencers to drive traffic to your website? And does it drive traffic to download an app as well?
Yeah, I mean, so affiliate marketing is a direct payment. Like affiliate marketing, if somebody takes some action, there's some revenue that comes back to them. We actually on Klout, we never paid the influencers. It was really about, these people are super passionate about cars, we did thousands of perks, but they were all interesting in their own ways, but whatever, they were super targeted. Like, if we worked with L'Oreal, it was people who were really interested in beauty. If we worked with, Sony, it was people interested in photography or whatever. The reward for those people was just the intrinsic value of being recognized by the brand and having a cool experience and getting something that, ahead of their friends that they could brag about. And it was more brand advertising. So because we couldn't tell the influencer, or we refused to tell the influencer, like, hey, do this, we couldn't tell our influencers, like, tweet to your followers to go download this app. Like, we just wouldn't do that. If they decided to say that, they could. We're not a good conversion marketing tool. So we tried with a few distribution deals on like app downloads. It was really hit or miss. Sometimes it would work, but like it was kind of random. So we stayed away from it and worked more higher level Fortune 100 brands on like just brand advertising. The affiliate marketing for a distribution channel, I've never tried it on an app, but I think it's good that you're going out with a go-to-market strategy. That is, like, you could build the coolest app in the world, but like there's so much noise and it's so hard to get people on your, to even notice you exist, that you should try affiliate marketing and 10 other things you could think of. Like, that is, once you're out, the sole focus is just growth. Like, it doesn't matter what features you add. Like, it's really just like distribution. Oh, you can ask. Yeah, so there's, I showed the very first screen of when Klout launched, and it's like hideous, and you just, you have to get out, and there's a saying that's popular of like, if you're proud of what you put out there, you waited too long. Like, you just have to get stuff out there and start getting data, and like we were definitely like immature. Like, the product was, so to tell you how immature it was, when Klout launched, when people would register, it would send me an email. I would have to manually go to Twitter and download their data and manually put it in Excel to calculate their Klout score. I would then manually update their web page, the Klout score on their page, and email them manually to tell them, hey, check it out, it worked. And it would take it could take, from registration to their score, it could take like 3 days, depending on how many people were in the queue. And so it was like all duct taped together and all like terrible. But it was enough to be like, oh wow, people really care about this and it kind of works. And then I was able to hire people and get funding, and like, you're never prepared, you never have enough team, you're never, like, the product is never good enough. But ultimately, like, there's really, you just kind of like, hopefully momentum propels you through it. But the only way to start that momentum going is putting something out there. Gentleman in the back. Yeah, this was, so, I was having all these conversations with investors about Klout, and they would ask about it, and I'd be like, well, we're measuring influence, and they'd be like, okay, well, what are you going to do with that? And there's a lot of things we could do with that. You could be just a pure data company. We could sell data to advertisers. You could be a consumer company. You could be an advertising company. You could be a consulting company. You could be all these things. So I'd go to these meetings, and I'd have an idea, and I'd have a deck, and I'd go pitch them, and they'd be like, oh, that's all good, but like, data is what's important. This is going to be a huge data play. I invested in 5 other data companies. They're huge. Data's the next big thing. And I'd be like, yeah, you're totally right. And I would like start selling data and be talking about data, and like go home that night and totally redo the deck and make it focused on data. And the next day I would go pitch somebody, and they'd be like, yeah, I just had some really bad experiences at data companies, and like, advertising is what I think you should do. And I'd be like, you know what, I was totally thinking the same thing. Like, I was just talking to my partner on the drive over here, and we just decided like, data's crap. We're all about advertising. And like, I'd go home that night and like rechange the deck, and like seriously spent 6 months pitching, and like every night going home and like redoing the deck until I was like basically insane. And finally just said like, I don't care.